Guys, Doctrine and Covenants 118. Watch this, okay? It says, and as all have not faith, seek ye diligently and teach one another words of wisdom. Yea, seek ye out of the best books words of wisdom. Seek learning, and then watch this, okay? Even by study and also by faith. Okay, there are two ways that we can learn. Today, we're going to look at this idea of seek ye by faith. Yesenia's back to help us understand this a little bit better. So Doctrine and Covenants 88, 118 through 141. This is come follow me quick take for these verses. We're looking at August 12th. It's Thursday. So let's just jump into this, right? We see this verse of learn by study and also by faith. Would you say that there are two different ways to learn? Like if we're learning by study and also by faith? Have you seen that difference in your life?
Yes, I think so.
Okay, so for school, there's a way that we can learn, right? Through studying stuff, and that's one way of learning.
Mm-hmm.
But then learning by faith is it's something different.
Yeah.
It's a different skill that we have to develop.
Yeah.
I think that's one reason why people struggle to find answers in the Gospels, because it's a different way of learning.
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe this is what we need to think about. What does it mean to learn something spiritually? And how do I do it? And then we share with us what this principle is down here. We've got like an equation here. I feel like I'm in math class. Share with us here.
Yeah, so time plus effort equals spiritual learning, and that leads to eternal blessings.
I like this. Okay, so this is the principle we're looking for today. Here's the question that we're going to ask about this. Elder Bednar, one of his big things is learning by faith and helping us understand how we do that. He has a quote that I love. It says, learning by faith requires spiritual, mental, and physical exertion and not just passive reception. Learning by faith cannot be transferred from an instructor to a student through a lecture, a demonstration, or an experiential exercise. Rather, a student must exercise faith and act in order to obtain the knowledge for himself or herself. What stands out to you about that?
Yeah, for me, I like to think of it as how you use the classroom example. When we're in class, we're studying for an exam or a test, but faith is the actual test that you probably didn't study for. It's a test, and then you learn from that test. Yeah. So I think that I like to think of it like that. It's kind of flipped.
Yeah, I love that. Right, to gain faith, to learn something spiritually, we can't just be like, I read it in a book. Mm-hmm. Right, it has to be something that we do.
Yeah. So,
commandment. Shoot out a commandment. What's one of the commandments that we've been given?
One of the first things that I think of is to love one another. So to be charitable to other people.
Yeah, right. So the Lord says, love one another as I have loved you. Correct? And so we have to act on that. In order for us to know that that is a true commandment, we need to act upon it, right?
Yeah.
And as we do that, our faith grows, and we can see and we have experiences that teach us these important principles, right? So the time and the effort we put in will lead us to spiritual learning, which in turn leads us to these eternal blessings. Okay, so let's see what this looks like in the scriptures here, okay? So look at verse 19, or 119, sorry. And let me get my notes here. There's a list of things that we can do to organize ourselves, right? So as we read this, would you just comment on how one of those things on that list has helped you grow spiritually? Okay, so it gives us a big list of things to organize, but how has one of the things on this list helped you grow spiritually? Okay. Do you want me to read it or do you want to?
You can read it.
Perfect. Okay, here we go. So it says, organize yourselves, prepare every needful thing, and establish a house, even a house of prayer, a house of fasting, a house of faith, a house of learning, a house of glory, a house of order, and a house of God. Okay. How have you seen any of these things help you learn something spiritually?
Okay. For me, fasting is really important. I feel like I've learned how to have self-control with fasting. And spiritually, it also teaches me that the body is literally the place where our spirit resides, and it's like a temple to our soul. So when I fast, I feel that really strongly while I'm fasting. Yeah. It can be a struggle though. especially when you're hungry. But when you really go through it, you learn how important it is to have that self-control that you need, especially to resist temptation, I think, and that's one.
Yeah. How have you seen your ability of self-control grow, and how has that blessed you in other ways?
Oh yeah, I used to, well, I still am sometimes, but when I would get really mad, I would just I don't want to say like explode, right? But I would for sure like tell the person that I'm mad at like something that would like really be mean or like hurtful. But now I've learned like I need to reel back on that and maybe think more clearly and be more, forgiving and more peaceful. And I feel like fasting has taught me to like just kind of like contain myself and be like, okay, maybe I'm mad, but maybe, let me give it some time. And over time, I'll be able to forgive or feel peace.
Yeah.
So I think that's one of those.
Fasting is such a powerful thing, right? We're stopping ourselves from eating, but it's not just that, right? And I love that you're talking about this self-control, this idea of being able to control our bodies, right? For me, I love fasting as well. When I was serving my mission, I would fast like every week. And I don't recommend that for everybody. It's a lot of time without food. But I saw a lot of miracles come from fasting. So my testimony is just rock solid on the power of fasting, what it can do for somebody's life. We were teaching a family, and the mother and father weren't married, and we wanted them to get baptized. They wanted to get baptized, but they needed to get married. And so I remember getting a phone call from the lady one time, and she's like, I want to fast, and I know that it can be helpful. And so she started fasting. And I remember the next day getting a phone call from her, and she was just so excited and so happy because she was able to do it, right? And she fasted that they could get married, and that things would work out. And she just told me about the peace that came to her as she was fasting, that everything would be okay and would work out. And in the end, it did. But it just comforted her, and I could see the power of fasting and what it was doing to her. And it also helped her know that God was there, and that he was mindful of their situation. And so I think that's an important thing that fasting does for us as well.
Yeah.
Is it helps us to remember that God is mindful of our situation. Awesome. And so what have you seen as you read verse 119? How have you seen one of these things help you learn something spiritually? Okay, so let's jump down to verse 125. Would you read that for us?
And above all things, clothe yourselves with the bond of charity, as with the mantle, which is the bond of perfectness and peace. I love this one.
Yeah, why do you love it? What do you love about it?
Because throughout this entire pandemic, the first thing, especially in the Relief Society, the first thing that the Relief Society has done is to be charitable. And I think that's so amazing. And this one especially says that, when we clothe ourselves with charity, we have, perfectness of peace. And I feel that testimony, I have felt that for sure throughout this entire trial that we've had.
Yeah. Can I ask you just a couple of questions about this? So it says that the Lord mentions above all things. Like, so this to me just shows this is like the most important thing he's telling them right now, right? He says that you need to do all of this other stuff, but above everything else, you need to remember. And then what does he say? To clothe yourselves with the bond of charity. It's an interesting word that he uses, clothe, right? He doesn't say have charity or be charitable or develop the attribute of charity. He says clothe yourself with the bond of charity. Why would he use the word clothe? Like what is it? What does that word mean?
Yeah. For me, when I hear the word clothe, the first thing that I think of, again, with charity is we're giving, donating clothes to people who need it, and who need clothes. And so I feel like it's kind of the same thing with the armor of God kind of thing. So when we clothe ourselves with charity, it's not just like a one-time thing. Oh, I'm going to help, this one time. I'm going to do this one service project this one time. And then, you're done. You're wearing that. So you always want to be like that. You always want to have that attitude of charity.
And when I think about when you clothe something, it's like you wrap it up in it, right? And so it's to have something like that's attached to us, right? When I put my shirt on, like I can't just like pull it off. Like I have to do this physical effort
Yeah,
of actually taking it off, right?
exactly.
And so when we clothe ourselves in charity, it's not just saying do a charitable act, it's saying become
Charitable.
charitable, right?
Yeah.
Become this idea of charity. And I love how it says, as with a mantle. Like, do you know what a mantle is?
I think it's
Other than like the fireplace?
I think of like the tablecloth thing. You put it over the table. Is that it?
Okay, kind of, yes.
Yeah.
So for something that I love to do, 1828 dictionary, right? This was the dictionary that was being produced and put out, the definition for words at the time that Joseph Smith was alive.
Okay.
And so they have it online, you can look it up, and you can look up any word and how it was described in its definition from that dictionary. And I think it's really important that we look at, because that's exactly what Joseph Smith would have had come to mind when the Lord says what he says, right? So he tells them to clothe yourself with the bond of charity as with a mantle. Okay, so what does mantle mean in Joseph Smith's time? And I looked it up. So it says mantle, it's like a shawl, right? So it's a cloak or a garment that you wear, that you put over top of you, right? But one other idea that I noticed is that mantle can also be a verb. And I didn't know this. And so this might be pulling at straws a little bit here, but I think it has a really good application to this idea of clothing ourselves with the bond of charity. So as a verb, the word mantle means to joy or to revel, or also to be expanded, to be spread or extended. Okay, so if we think about charity being this verb, right? To joy or to revel, to be expanded. I just think about, like, we talk about service, right? Service is a really great way to have charity. And so if we do service without having any expectation of receiving anything in return, have you ever, or how have you felt the joy that comes from that? Or what joy does come from that?
Yeah, I actually have a personal example of that. I think a couple months ago, we had a family, not of our ward, but from another ward. Their house burned down. It was pretty devastating for them. And our ward and their ward together, we worked together to help them get clothes, food, and just to find a temporary home while they could figure out build themselves up from there. And so with my Relief Society, we would take food for them because they were staying at a hotel for a while, and so we would every week we'd assign sisters so that they could bring them food so they could eat. And it was pretty tough at first because middle of pandemic, people also had their stuff going on, and then it was pretty far too, so they had to drive far. But I noticed that we all worked together and there was this unity with us, and the spirit was so strong, and we got to see how they were so grateful. This family was so grateful, and they weren't very active, and then they started to come back and be active, and we just saw this change in them as an entire family. They also seemed a lot closer, and it was just a big blessing for all of us. We all got to be humbled, everyone, not just them but us as well, and it was a wonderful experience. So I think that was one way.
And it's just this thought came into my head that charity can turn a tragedy into a blessing. And a blessing for others, a blessing for us.
Yeah.
So just this idea of the joy that comes when we wrap ourselves in charity and service for our fellow man. And then it says that another definition of it was to be expanded, to be spread or extended. And so as we do these acts of service, it feels like we're growing. Yeah. Right. And that's just one more way that we can see how we can use charity to help us grow spiritually. Yeah. Right. And so we want to, as we put in the time and the effort, we have this spiritual learning, which will lead to these eternal blessings and this joy that it talks about here in Doctrine and Covenants 88:125. And so the challenge for this week or for today is to come up with a way that you can serve somebody else, right? And ask Heavenly Father as you're serving and afterwards to help you feel as though you have been clothed in charity. You gave us a really wonderful example, and we want everybody to have those same kinds of feelings. So try it out, see how it happens. Okay, you ready for questions for conversion? So the idea here, in verses 128 through 141, okay, the Lord sets out the order for the school of the prophets. And he teaches that when we're studying the gospel, it's important to have a good relationship with those around us. If we want to learn things spiritually, we need to have, as we're in church or in a gospel setting in our homes, that we need to have a good relationship with those people around us. So what do you learn from these verses about how to enhance your own testimony and your spiritual growth? Well, that's all we've got for today. Thank you guys for being here. Thank you for sharing this time. Yesenia, thank you so much. This has been a joy, and you've been fantastic. Put in the comments things that you've learned, things that you've felt, and how you've been blessed through the study of Doctrine and Covenants 88. Thanks, guys. See ya.
Bye.